Well, good morning, everybody. Kind of like Matt did yesterday, I want to start off with just a quick recap of what this past weekend and early this week has done. So I want to show you our season-to-date snow maps. This is one of them that looks at the percent of normal. Now, the data that I'm using to find the historical average only goes back to 2008. And that's important to know. That's not a very, very long time series, but it's what data are publicly available that are on a gridded national view, so I'm going to use it, okay? Now, what's interesting about the map, you probably honed in on this, is this region right over here, where we watched the snow from this past weekend coming through, and then what we saw early this week with some pretty significant snows that came through parts of the Ohio Valley and the eastern Great Lakes Basin. Now, you see the numbers here are huge when looking at percent of normal, and what this just says is that over the last 20 years or so, we have not had a lot of, early November snowfall events. So any snow that comes in during that time, when you compare it to those other time periods, is huge. Some of the numbers are here. But that was, that's what we saw. And just a quick recap, just to kind of get an idea about this, is here's where the snow initiated late last week into the weekend. And then if we fast forward a little bit, this is where it finished. And some of these lake effect events were impressive. Now, I'm deliberately skipping over the west. I'm talking about snow right now. And we're going to focus a whole lot more on this as we get deeper into the season, as these storm systems continue to line up and put more snow into the west. But we just have to be careful not to think too hard about early season snowpack in the west. It's going to be very critical once we get into December and watching it clear through March to determine how successful of a water year the west is going to have. So what I'm going to keep an eye on right now is this, okay? This kind of yesterday on the satellite data. You can look right under here. This is where that major lake effect band set up initially. Right there, you can see the snow under the clouds. Yeah, but all the snow that was in through here is gone. I mean, it's melted away. You can see the last little bit of it right there in this part of Iowa, just melting with the warmth, the rebound in temperatures. Now, yesterday I drove from Champaign to Chicago, and I'm just going to brag a little bit here. I drive a 15-year-old Audi, okay? That's my daily. But I got 40 miles to the gallon, and that is because that was a drive out of the south to the north, and we had just, ferociously strong southerly winds after what the previous days brought was really, really northerly winds. And that was all behind this big front right here. You can see it's cleared all the way down into the Caribbean, here. So pretty impressive. Now, I was driving to Chicago because I flew out to Portland. And it's kind of crazy, but I'm sitting on the plane. We had no Wi-Fi. I couldn't connect my earbuds to the seatback TV to watch something, and I didn't get my laptop out because I couldn't work, no Wi-Fi. So I'm literally just staring at the back of the seat in front of me, contemplating what I'm going to tell you in a few minutes. When all of a sudden, we get about here in South Dakota, almost going into parts of Wyoming and Montana, and the pilot comes over and says, "If you're sitting on the right side of the plane, you need to look out your window." And it was funny because it's kind of silly, but my first thought was like, oh, Superman's going to be out there, right? I mean, how many times have I heard that on the Superman movies? But it wasn't Superman. It was this. And I got to be honest, I've never seen Aurora quite like this. I know that back home in Illinois, many of you saw Aurora. You saw it all across the country, but I may have had the best seat for this, and just impressive overall. I think that's Rapid City if I know where I am here, but I mean, you can even see some of the stars in the picture that I took, and it was incredible. I've never ever been able to witness it like this. I just wanted to share that with you all today. Okay, big story for me before the Aurora, what I was thinking about. Okay, so just sit back and take this all in. I want to talk about these temperatures because today's highs are already rebounding in a big way, right? Look at this. Look at tomorrow. Getting into Friday, 80s, possibly in South Dakota. Now, the west is going to cool. The northeast hangs on to it longest. But watch the rebound in warmth here by Saturday. I mean, we might hit 80 in St. Louis, 82 in Norman. I mean, this is very, very mild air. And what's going to be important to watch is what comes through Southern California later into next week that could disrupt this. But in the meantime, very mild conditions. They finally press into the south and east after what's been very cold conditions in the morning. And you just notice, watch Southern California to Arizona. I'm going to show you these precip totals in a few minutes for that area, but the temperatures really just drop off again as a deeper low, a pair of them actually works into the west. Now, we do expect the temperatures to go on a ride. I mean, it's very typical in November for that to happen, but I've been thinking about these temperatures because there's the next 5 days compared to average. We slide this out today, 5 through 10. Yep, larger systems. Matt really hammered on this yesterday. We talked about it on Monday. We're going to take a new look at what they're going to do here in the West. But overall, very mild throughout the central part of North America, all the way from the Gulf Coast clear up to the Canadian archipelago. And we just see this going out farther. Here we are, the 24th, 25th, 26th, the 5 days ending on the 27th. We start to see the western cooling down and the east warming up. Now, I need you to think hard about that, or just remember that for me for a second, okay? And the reason is what I got stuck thinking about before I saw the Aurora is this narrative. We've helped craft other meteorologists. If you follow other meteorologists, which you had better do that. You need to be comparing what Matt and Andrew and I do to others. That's very wise in trying to make your decisions. But, our big narrative has been we've got a couple of things fighting in the tropics to control, I think, the rest of the world's weather patterns. We have the La Nina, which I think is nearing its peak and strengthening right now. We have the Indian Ocean Dipole, which is crashing. It's actually reached its peak and it's fading fast. I'm going to hammer on that a lot on Friday's video. But it seems to be holding the MJO kind of hostage right here in phase 6 and 7 for now. But we think it's going to get let loose. And I'm going to make a case for this on Friday, but I think the first thing to give up is the Indian Ocean Dipole. And that's going to allow these trade winds to race back across this here, I think. Okay, that's what I think is going to happen. That's going to reset everything with La Nina going into probably December. And I think La Nina is going to start to fade hard. Now, more on that very, very soon. But what did we talk about? If we get this residual phase 6 effect, this is what one possible outcome of December may look like, right? And we've just seen access to cold air. Now, I just want to make a case. This isn't like cold every single day, brutal Arctic, non-stop craziness in December. It's going to come in waves, like normal, okay? But I think the jet stream is going to be responding in a very wavy manner. And I'm going to be honest with you, the true test in all of this is going to be Alaska. So watch what we're going to do here. Because it's not just, the analogs. We have the models supporting it. And that's the week leading up to Thanksgiving. And then watch this. That's how December is expected to start according to the European model. In addition to that, we've seen the risk of the sudden stratospheric warming event. That's what that big stratospheric ridge of heat moving over like Alaska. And what it's doing is just displacing and weakening the polar vortex, which that weak polar vortexes result in better outlets of cold air somewhere across the northern hemisphere. And man, this one's going really weak really early. Matt and I have talked extensively about that. And then you see some of the forecasts of the MJO, like a little piece is trying to split off here, jump over to phase 8-1, but the majority of it's sticking around there. This, though, is what I'm interested in. Because I want you to just take note. This is subsidence trying to work its way at some point, into December here. Now, can you also tuck that away in the back of your mind? Okay, all that being said, the longer range outlook, I don't show this to you very often because it's a bit tricky to diagnose and understand. But the weather regime frequency as put out by the European subseasonal forecast, you see this block of reds in through here? This is looking at the cumulative frequency. So don't worry about it. It's just suggesting that we could get ourselves into a blocked pattern. When? After the 27th. See that? And I'm curious if this blocking pattern has what it takes to make, like our forecasts, where was it? Here, make this come true. And that's a lot of central North American cold that moves east. It's more mild west. So I did this. I went back and I looked at the central United States in December and just reconstructed using NOAA's tools here back to 1895 what the temperatures look like for average December temperatures. What's nice about this tool called Climate at a Glance is you can rank everything. So I went through here and I found some big years, like 2000 was a cold one. Same thing with 2013. 2022 was a cold December. 89 is one that sticks out personally. I was 9 years old. I remember that one. 83 was a big one too. My folks talk a lot about the late 70s, like 78 and 79, but that was more later into winter as just an epic, epic winter. I wasn't around yet, just a twinkle in their eyes at that point. But still, we got to talk about this. So here's what I did. What does it take? You just need to think this through with me. If you want to watch this with me, go to AgWeather. You can find all of these maps and links to these as well. So listen. In those cold Decembers, we had massive ridging events of high pressure in the upper atmosphere here. So can you see the stacked up high over low? That's blocked. That's why we're looking for blocking. So the flow does this and then dives. It helps if you can get high pressure to build over Greenland. That's kind of a double blocking setup. The Rockies channel the cold. It moves east, sets up deep Hudson lows, deep Great Lake lows, and the atmosphere just rolls like this. So it takes a ridge over Alaska. All right, that's the first thing. You're saying, well, what about, should we look for an El Nino or La Nina? No. Don't. There's actually a very little, if no, signal down here when you look at all these years. Some of them are big El Nino years, some of them are big La Nina years, doesn't matter. What matters is this. Remember how I went on and on about Chukchi Sea, Bering Sea, the North, Pacific Ocean temperatures. That's your critical spot to watch. Here's the next thing, MJO. Remember I showed you a moment ago? Let's go back to it real fast. I said, I'm interested in this. If that ends up setting up wide-scale subsidence by, some point, this is the 3rd of December, starts moving its way toward this area, history says, where did I put that darn thing? There it is, that if you can get subsidence in that area, you put the rising motion, I should put a dot here and here, which means it moves back toward phase 1, 2, or 8. And the subsidence is phase 4, 5. Now, we think that might happen. And if that does happen, you just saw it in the forecast, I showed it to you, what tends to occur in the upper atmosphere is you end up building, whoops, I drew that wrong. You end up building this, a deep low here in the flow, comes up into a big ridge, and the Arctic air comes cross-polar. Matt mentioned this yesterday, and the flow dives and exits. That's what the anomalous jet stream level winds will do. And what it looks like in November, when you go from November to December is, December goes over very mild here, mild there, and in the middle, we just displace all of the cold air. Now, I flubbed there and said November because I want to show you what happens in November. The same years in November, it's very cold in this area and cold on the west and mild in the southeast. Now, think that through for just a second, okay? Just look at this, because this is where we've been so far. We're already establishing cold here, but we're not, for the beginning of November, in the right phase across North America. We're flip-flopped, right? See it? But what is the forecast showing? See? It's going toward that idea. So this is what's lending support. Now, I want to be very clear here. If you think I'm confident about calling for some major Arctic outbreak in December, I am not. Any one of these things, should it collapse or change, will give us an entirely different regime. And the atmosphere has humbled me enough over the last 25 years of weather forecasting to know that it could very well happen. But just things are stacking up. So we're going to talk about them and present them as evidence as to why we think, making figures like this and sending them to you makes sense. And that's the sequence of events that we're watching as we go forward into this forecast. Okay, so where were we? There. Now, this morning, we're still pretty cold down here in the southeast where Matt was yesterday. We have actually lingering freeze warnings down here at 6:35 a.m. I'm on West Coast time, so I've been up for a while, but man, I love it out here, but it's so much easier to forecast the weather when you're a couple time zones east and you can beat everybody to waking up. But anyway, we're still cold down here, but this is all going to rebound pretty quickly, and all of our attention is going to go to the west, where we have wind issues, winter storm warnings for the southern Sierra, winter weather advisories. Just take a look at the system coming into the west. And this is what the the lower atmosphere pattern looks like right now. But what I'm most interested in going forward, from California all the way to the mid-south, is that guy right there. Now here's the bigger trough. It's this little wave that's out ahead of it that I think is going to keep my interest for a little while here. And the reason is where the models are suggesting that goes. It's this guy right here. You see, the wave on the back is going to kick it. So there's the wave on the back. It's going to kick this right into California, Northern California, as the big ridge opens into the central U.S. and the cold exits east. So there's all the heat building into the middle part of the country. Now, you can see that wave gets tossed out ahead of this. Okay, watch it again right here. It gets tossed out ahead of this and becomes part of this. But without that wave, this would not be able to cut off down here, that lead wave, cut off down here by Friday. And that comes through California. We'll take a look at the snow and everything in a few moments. And it tries to work its way into the central U.S., and then that wave is the one that gets kicked by the one behind it. So the kicker gets kicked, all right? But the main point is we're delivering flow that has some sort of southwest component into a preceding ridge, and the net effect is we're going to open up to some moisture with this. And while the northeast hangs on to the cold the longest through the weekend, we're going to see this system come out in the plains. It's going to just move right into this part of the upper Midwest. And behind it, there's a larger wave that's going to follow. And so we're out here next Tuesday, Wednesday, and guess what? The wave that was kicked by the kicker wave is now getting kicked. Oh gosh, I don't know what I'm talking about, but here's the next one. See it? And that one's going to come through and toss this guy out. But then the whole story here is over the next 10 days. A couple things happening. Troughs are moving in and ridging's returning. See the ridge? See the low. That is a recipe such that by the end of November into December says watch out for cold coming down like this using the spine of the Rockies as its main channel to get into the eastern half of the country. Now, the models don't fully agree on all of this, so I'm going to show you vorticity maps in the GFS versus European model kind of setup here. So look at this. Here we are, big ridge, both models, Thursday into Friday. There's my kicker wave, my deeper wave. But look at the GFS. It's got them both absorbed together. And what ends up happening is when the GFS does that, it's a more progressive. It's a little farther, north. It's more connected with the wave to the north here. The European's a little more cut off. As we play this out, they both eventually cut it off, so that's all right. I like that. We are 102 hours out in the forecast, so this is Sunday. But then this is where things really get interesting. Remember all those waves getting kicked? Look at the difference here in these waves. See that? That's only by next Monday. And as a result, what we had originally thought where this wave was going to link up with something coming out of Ontario and give us this kind of double sit, nope, it's no longer there in the forecast. And the depth of this low here versus the one that's in the GFS is much, much deeper in the European model. So I'm just showing you this because beyond that, they don't agree as well. I mean, this is just 1 week from now. Trough here in the Euro, ridge in the GFS, deep trough over California, ridge. I mean, the models completely lose it at that far out. So while I was kind of bragging on them being in alignment, what was that, a week, 10 days ago? They're gone. It's all that's gone. So GFS versus European again. There's the low coming into the west. It's a big one. Thursday into Friday. Then we see the difference in the models where they drop down the upper level low over California. Okay, but precip looks similar, not bad. In fact, honestly, through 90 hours, despite some of the early differences, these two maps look very similar, including the little system that's going over, the Great Lakes. But remember, this was the system that I thought this wave was already going to be over the plains to connect with, and now they're just completely separate. So what happens when you cut off a low? So now, Sunday into Monday, the low comes over the mountains, and instead of diving in through the Mid-South, where is it now? The Southern Plains toward the Mid-South, it's way up here. And that's Monday. And what this did was it took a lot of the rain that was here out of the forecast in the European. There's still some in the GFS. Now, that doesn't mean we're in trouble, but just watch. Tuesday into Wednesday, you have to wait until that low gets over the Great Lakes for the Bermuda high, which is trying to return to open up a little bit of moisture here. But it's not in the GFS. We're now out there where the models don't agree. So we just keep playing this forward. Models are trying to do something in the middle part of the country, but man, they're just a mess overall trying to stay together. So I want to just point out something. Go to agweather.com. All I did was this. I'm on AgWeather. Come over to Weather Maps. You always ask for, when we interviewed a bunch of you, just like, hey, give me the full array. So I did. We made a whole tab called Weather Maps, and slide down here until you see the 5 model comparison. Now you can click on any one of these and see what they are saying. So here's what I'm going to do, all right? I want to show you the European model solution. That's through Friday. Look at the system coming into the west. California wants and needs this water. Now we're going to watch that system come out. It's much farther to the north now. Earlier in the forecast, this rain was here. Kind of a bit frustrating. And then we get out there. This is next Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We see it really open up to a lot of wet conditions here. But now there's just a large open area of drier conditions where we had been seeing forecasts for wetter. That's your 10-day from the European. That's the 10-day from the GFS. If you are a fan of the GFS, just jump back on that bandwagon for right into this part of the country. Look at the difference. From there, what about snow? Well, here's the European model snow. California, Sierra Nevada. That's why they have the winter storm warnings there. With the system coming through, it's really trying to bring in some big snows here to parts of Saskatchewan, maybe parts of Montana and North Dakota. Also keeping something alive here, but just be careful. That's way out there at the very end of the forecast run, so let's not give that too much hope. But what does the GFS say? That's through Monday. Holy cow, look at that system. Entirely different setup. Models are all over the place, and this just happens. We're just missing it. I think a lot of this is just due to the cutoff nature of some of these lows that's making it difficult to stay on top of them for forecasting. I can say this, all of the models tend to agree that that week 2 time period, the 19th through the 25th or the 20th through the 26th on the newly updated models here, it's at least going after something here which we need, while giving the Northwest maybe a little bit of a break. But Matt and I will be watching very carefully this week on how well the models get timed together with this. These are ensembles, right? I'm actually going to have to call Andrew probably soon too, because I would like to know if we have a severe weather threat out of this, and that's his area of expertise. These vigorous waves in late November can do it down in the south. Now, I don't know yet. I haven't looked carefully, but I want to keep an eye on that too. All right, I do want to mention this. The Climate Prediction Center, along with NOAA, they are in NOAA, they do have that November 19th through the 25th risk for heavy rain down here. And they do have the risk of snow, big snows in the back. And why this matters so much is here. Last 2 weeks, we've been so dry. And if the European model's right, this whole area just misses. But we could possibly fill in some of these gaps here should these models get honed in properly on this moisture. So I'm just going to tell you right now, we just went from a time period where the near-term models were giving us some consistency, giving us more confidence, and they just wiped that out. All right, from there, let's just look at one other thing here. This is the new GFS Extended. This goes out from November 16 to December 16. And again, it's got drier southeast, and notice how it's gone drier for the west. Now, why? Remember, these models are considering putting larger ridges of high pressure in the Gulf of Alaska toward Alaska. That's what's going to unlock that cold air and set up an active pattern here in December. The European model is not as dry over this time period for the West. It still has something like that, which is why these near-term systems are so important for the West. But wow, the European model from November 16 to December 16, look at the delta coming out of the Red River Valley of the South. I mean, it's still very active for much of the country. All right, one last thing to cover here. Well, 2 more things. The temperatures in South America. You can already see the beginnings of the warmth returning. This whole area that's shaded in white here is now not expecting a frost from now through November the 18th. We're still dealing with this morning, right? That's where that cold air was this morning. But just take a look at the temperature pattern. All right, we take note that this warmth over the next 5 days spreads, settles here day 5 through 10. We start to really bring in the active weather in the west, right? The much colder conditions. And then day 10 through 15. This is where we're going to have to watch carefully. If the heat comes into Alaska, right, there it is, we will start to see this be the channel through which all the cold air makes it to the east as we get into the month of December. So that's that narrative that we're trying to craft there. All right, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to cover on Friday. I'm going to leapfrog Matt tomorrow and just tell you this. I've went out and constructed a bunch of analog years for when we see La Nina, negative IOD, where IOD collapses first and La Nina makes a big surge early. I want to show you those years, so that's what I'm going to show you on Friday. In the meantime, I do want to give you a quick update on what's going on in South America. Now, we looked at planning progress on Monday. We know that it's not overly fast this year, and I just want to point out that there are some areas of the last 30 days that are in deficit. So you can see here several spots that are just, especially in the east, that are quite dry. Now, over the last week, there were better rains. I mean, it wasn't as though everyone got rain, but it was a decent amount of moisture. But watch what the models are doing for the next couple of weeks. Right now, very warm, very dry for the next 7 days here. Much wetter from Bolivia through Mato Grosso do Sul, Paraguay, Paraná, getting into northern Argentina. I mean, this is clipping parts of Santa Fe, but not really getting to Cordoba or over toward Buenos Aires. So let me go from there. This is the 10-day outlook, but let's just show you week 2. Now you see that much of Argentina is going drier, as is southern Brazil, and a surge of moisture is coming into eastern Brazil all the way to Mato Grosso. Now, is the GFS in agreement? Well, over the next 7 days, yes, the models align quite well with the same forecast I just explained. That's the 10-day, but watch week 2. The GFS is also trying to bring in wetter conditions here while leaving it drier. And our biggest concern going longer range is that this area does have the drier risk while we see a lot more moisture in through here. And again, the analog analysis I'm going to present to you on Friday is going to be supportive of that as we think about what December, January, February might look like for South America. But in the near term, I hope this video was at least a bit instructive on our thought process as we go forward. And we'll watch these model discrepancies very carefully. But you all have a good rest of your day. I'm going to hopefully fly home tonight. I think I might try to switch my seat side if I can maybe get another shot of those just absolutely incredible Aurora. Man, I got lucky last night seeing this stuff. So take care, everybody. Talk to you on Friday.